For my CIMT 350 field placement, I had the opportunity to observe at Terre Haute North with Mr. Williams and Mr. McLeod. I observed the symphonic band and the percussion class and was able to teach the percussion class a lesson over rudiments. So what are rudiments? Rudiments are exercises that are condensed and they focus on the repeated patterns between the left and right hand. They're small fragments of music, so it's essentially just a guide for percussionists to get comfortable with the patterns that come up in their music. So 2 times left hand, 2 times right hand, or 1 time left hand, 1 time right hand, repeated over and over so that they get a comfortability with their arms individually and with seeing the sticks in different patterns. And that's essentially the advantage for students. They're able to sight read music better, they have a better understanding of how their hands will work together and what it feels like to double up on one and not the other, and just an independence with their hands that is important for percussion because of the nature of the instrument. Mr. McLeod was in charge of the percussion ensemble, and I was able to observe his class 2 times before teaching this particular segment. He was actually gone for the day, so there was no substitute, and Mr. Williams gave me the go-ahead to jump up on the podium and get some stuff done. So rudiments was something I felt comfortable enough to teach students, and it's part of their unit for the entire school year and for what needs to be covered before they graduate. They have a sheet of almost an endless amount of rudiments and points at each stage in their development and year in school that they need to get to on this list so that they can become a well-rounded musician by the time they're ready for anything after high school. So all of this related to my plan of study for a good number of reasons. The biggest thing for me was participation. I wanted to be able to play with the ensemble as Mr. Williams or Mr. McLeod was conducting, or I wanted to conduct the ensemble, working with students individually or in groups. And these were also my goals. At the end of the day, I wanted to feel more comfortable on top of the podium and in front of high schoolers because that's something that doesn't come comfortable for me at all. And I had hoped to learn by observing and by teaching in the classroom how to find that comfortability, even if it's a place that I would regularly not feel comfortable. And after finding that, I wanted to implement it. So starting out pretty uncomfortable up on the podium, but getting used to it after a while, and then learning by doing, essentially. My hypothesis for this final project is that the students would respond well to quick, pointed instruction. And this might seem a little bit strange for this type of project, but I felt that this was something I could explore because in my first 2 observations, I saw both Mr. McLeod and Mr. Williams use very short instruction with his students, but the atmosphere still maintained very positive. The students were giving feedback almost constantly when they were asked for it. There was engagement every class period, and I just felt that the students were enjoying themselves as well as Mr. Williams and Mr. McLeod were enjoying the time that they were spending on the podium. So I had hoped to implement this in a number of different ways, but again, due to the coronavirus, I was stuck in a sort of a pickle. So I had the opportunity to do this 15-minute lesson, and I knew that it was my one chance to really get comfortable using the type of instruction that their students felt the most comfortable with. So the quick pointed instruction really came into play with my exercise explanation and implementation. The method for learning of my hypothesis was tempo, forms, groups, and singular, and we did that through reading, evaluating, defining, performing, and repetition. So I had the students start by reading the exercise on their own and evaluating it. So I gave them a second to really think in their head, okay, that's on the right, one on the left, or specifically for the rudiment I taught paradiddles, it's 1 right, 1 left, 2 right, or 2 right, 1 left, 1 right. So paradiddle. Or you could do it the opposite, starting with left, but we can get into that later. So I just let the students kind of evaluate that on their own for a moment. And then I would ask for volunteers very pointedly, say, take a moment, look over this, figure out what the hand positions are going to be for you guys. Can I have a volunteer to define what that would look like? And they would say right, left, right, right, or right, right, left, right, or left, left, right, left, whatever the rudiment would be that we are going over. And then I myself would perform. I would have the student who volunteered perform for the rest of the class, which I think everyone kind of got a kick out of. And then we as a group would just repeat it over and over using the method for learning. So we would increase the tempo so that the students were doing it really fast, or if I felt like and could see that there were some students that were not doing the correct hand position, we would slow everything down and really make sure that we were doing right, right, left, right, or we would focus on form. So again, slowing the tempo down was the easiest way to do this, or walking around in between the students within the classroom made it easier for me to see if the stick heights were all over the place, if their back wasn't straight, if they weren't confident, they didn't have good posture, and that's something that we need to continue. And that led into my idea within the lesson to just break everyone into groups, turn the person to your right or to the person to your left. We're going to start the exercise again. One of you is going to be examining the other, and one person is going to be performing. And the students again really enjoyed this because it gave them the opportunity to see how their friends were doing it, and I think made them feel more comfortable with where some of the students were at understanding the exercise. And then altogether, immediately after the groups, I could see a large improvement across the board. So we went into singular. I had volunteers say, who wants to perform this for the rest of the class? And if I didn't have anyone, I'd pick a student, and they were all they didn't seem uncomfortable, very accommodating to when I asked them to play. And overall, I think it was a good experience for both me and them. So evaluating everything that happened with the well-pointed instruction and how the students responded to that, and my plan of study. Connected to my plan of study, I was able to conduct in front of the students and lead them. I got to overview the materials and select the rudiment that would be easiest, or not easiest, but most comfortable for me to teach the students, but also pushing the boundary because this is an instrument that I'm not familiar with. And again, that leads into my comfortability. I was able to see on the list of rudiments, okay, this is where I lie with being able to understand, and I know I could confidently do these ones, but which one out of that list is going to be kind of a push for me and something that I can prove to myself that I can teach, and I know that I can at least teach the basis of to the students. And my favorite part of the plan study that was incorporated into this lesson and into my observations was the theory aspect of it. In in the band world, most of the time, the theory, skills, history, and performance are all in different categories. And one of my parts of the plan of study was I wanted to see a classroom where theory was regularly implemented into the performance curriculum. And that's something, thankfully and happily, I can say that both Mr. Williams and Mr. McLeod do. They have tests every week that go over scales and things like that. And in my mind, rudiments are just a branch of scales, but in a percussion world and in a percussive language. Instead of what string instruments or wind instruments would be fingerings in technical studies, rudiments take the place of that in percussion. So it was awesome to be able to see that not only in the percussion class were we doing rudiments regularly, but also in symphonic band we were doing regular theory exams and making sure that all students had a true understanding of what they were able to perform to help them perform better. Student engagement and how using quick pointed instruction helped them to continue to be engaged. I assessed this first just because it was a hypothesis. I needed to make sure that what I was thinking could work correctly. So most of it was informal assessment, response, and then just overall thinking back to that type of management that I learned from Mr. Williams and Mr. McLeod. I would use informal assessment by walking around, like I had said, and looking at the students' stick heights or seeing visually in their face if they were had their tongue out and their eyes squinted a little bit. It was easier for me to tell if they weren't getting the concept or maybe the right hand movement. And also it was easier for me to tell what students definitely they had practiced this before. They were excited to show this weird college kid their rudiments that they had done so well because they'd be standing with their back completely straight, their eyes completely forward, and this look on their face the most concentration, but it was very fun to watch them do. And I think that having the quick pointed instruction really helped them to focus in on that. There was maybe 2 or 3 times within my instruction up on the podium where a student would say something to another, and then maybe I would hear it and they would go off on some sort of a tangent, or I would say a note that might make them feel more comfortable around me so that the comfortability could be perceived on both sides, and we would fall off track. But then getting right back into that quick pointed instruction and saying, okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, having them jump back into the exercise, they responded very well to. And I can say that, at least for this group of students, the hypothesis of using quick pointed instruction was definitely correct. So, future impacts for the students alone is using rudiments increases their technique. They're able to sight read, which means they can have a piece of music put in front of them, and because they know their rudiments so well, they can say, okay, well, right there, that's going to be right, left, and just play it for you right off the bat. And it transfers through the instruments. So physically, when we were doing the rudiments, they have a practice pad that's about the size of a small pizza. It's a little bit cushiony, and you have your 2 drumsticks, which would have been my visual aid. So again, you'll have to thank COVID-19 for the fact that you guys don't get to do drumming today. But you do just on the practice pad. It has a little bit of a bounce to it. You simply use sticks because that's the basis of what percussionists used. And this can transfer over to keyboard instruments or the big bass drum or the gong. If they see that type of same pattern over and over and they're using both hands, or even if they're only using one hand, they can say, okay, well, I know that this would be right, right, left, right. And I know that when it's a different hand attacking each time, there's going to be a little bit of an accent. So I'm going to do right, right, left, right. A little bit of accent on each one of them. And then for me, it helped with my language, knowing how to talk to the students. Just this one opportunity to stand in front of them, I feel truly helped me understand how to talk to them and how it's not that scary of a thing just because I had never been in front of a high school before. And it helped me be comfortable with the fact that I might have to teach high school and how to talk to them, how to act in front of them, how I don't have to carry myself with a stick all the way from my head down to my toes, but I also shouldn't be completely relaxed. And it really helped my percussive understanding because I knew that I had that understanding beforehand, but then being put on the spot and having to teach it definitely concretes it in your brain if it wasn't before for any reason. So, in conclusion, quick pointed instruction gets the job done for both myself and for the students in a very good, quick, and thorough way. I learned so much and gained so much from the experience of the entirety of my observations, from having conversations with Mr. Williams about different software programs that he uses, being able to take home the packets that he gave out to students or the evaluations that he would use in the classroom, and just seeing both Mr. Williams and Mr. McLeod, great educators, working with their programs to make them better and focusing on the students and how they need to be told things just put into perspective for me how I can study all I want these different methods for teaching and for getting to where I need to be for these students, but at the end of the day, it needs to come from them and what they need and what they want. And this experience definitely helped show me that. So, thank you.